Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK radio network. Any opinions or comments made by any guest are their own, and they do not necessarily reflect any of the presenters or network's opinions.
Good day to you. This is Sir Patrick Moore, and you're listening to the Paranormal UK radio network, the UK's biggest paranormal radio network, and this is Paranormal Dimensions with David Young.
Hello and welcome to show number 131 of Paranormal Dimensions. Thank you for that fine introduction, Sir Patrick. I have another amazing guest for you today. If anyone remembers Ghost Hunters International, Barry Fitzgerald will be joining us. But before I introduce Barry, as always, if you'd like to get in touch with me at any time, my email address is davidyoung2qn@yahoo.co.uk. That's davidyoung2qn@yahoo.co.uk. Now, as I mentioned, today's guest is Irish-born Barry Fitzgerald, who was the star of the hit show Ghost Hunters International. Now, since that show has come to an end some time back, Barry has become a very respected researcher in his own right and has written several books. He also has over 20 years' experience within the world of the paranormal, which has taken him to new levels of intrigue and mystery. He has explored and investigated many paranormal and supernatural phenomena around the world. Now, on the back of one of Barry's books, In the Midst of Gods, the owner of Paranormal UK Radio Network, Irene Allen Block, makes a comment. Legends, myth or truth, Barry Fitzgerald educates, excites and transports you to a hidden and little known world, but a world that coexists and interacts with us all. And I would agree with that. And I think you'll agree with me that Barry has a remarkable way of telling a story. Just before the interview with Barry, I'd like for you to have a listen to a recording that Barry did a while back about the Battle over Nuremberg in 1561. And I'm sure you'll appreciate his amazing storytelling.
As the sun began to rise over Nuremberg on April the 14th, 1561, waking residents in the city observed a peculiar sight. Modern interpretations from within the ufological sector have suggested the phenomena was early evidence of visitors from outer space. However, if we take a step back and look at the bigger picture, those initial UFOs take on a new perspective. An archive document from the 16th century, held in Zurich, Switzerland, describes the morning of April the 14th in Nuremberg, Germany. It lists details of hundreds of spheres, cylinders, and odd-shaped objects in actions that would resemble an aerial battle in the dawn sky. This all culminated in the appearance of a large black triangular object, followed by something crashing outside the city walls. It reads, "In the morning of April the 14th, 1561, at daybreak between 4 and 5 a.m., a dreadful apparition occurred on the sun, and then this was seen in Nuremberg in the city, before the gates and in the country, by many men and women." Further descriptions give us clues of what they were possibly witnessing. At first there appeared in the middle of the sun two blood-red semicircular arcs. just like the moon in its last quarter. And in the sun, above and below and on both sides, the colour was blood. There stood a round ball of partly dull, partly black ferrous colour. Likewise there stood on both sides, and as a torus about the sun, such blood-red ones, and other balls in large number, about 3 in a line and 4 in a square, also some alone. In between these globes there were visible a few blood-red crosses, between which there was blood-red stripes, becoming thicker to the rear, and in the front malleable, like the rods of reed grass, which were intermingled, among them 2 big rods, one on the right, the other on the left, and within the small and big rods there were 3, also 4 more globes. These all started to fight among themselves, so that the globes, which were first in the sun, flew out to the ones standing on both sides. Thereafter, the globes standing outside the sun, in the small and large rods, flew into the sun. Besides, the globes flew back and forth among themselves, and fought vehemently with each other for about an hour. The event was recorded by Hans Gleiser, a letter painter in Nuremberg, although it is unclear if he actually witnessed the phenomena himself, or if he was relaying some second or third-hand knowledge of the event. Either way, it was recorded in a broadsheet, a type of early newspaper, and carved on a wooden panel by Hans. The 30 Years' War had ended in 1648 and culminated in the ending of the Holy Roman Empire, and, sadly, the lives of over a quarter of the population that lived in the region we all know today as Germany. Catholic and Lutheran fought long and hard with each other during a time of failed crops, starvation, and climatic disasters. This was not the first time these strange phenomena had been reported. In fact, during the 30 Years' War, strange apparitions were seen in the skies overhead, which seemed to spawn a new fad of exaggerating these wonders in the sky and relate them to religious underpinnings, such as God's disdain over the Lutherans, and likewise the Lutherans seeing them as disquiet over the Holy See. On April the 2nd, 1554, another unusual sight in the sky was observed, though its location is unknown. Recorded in a broadsheet described mock suns, a phenomena in which there was more than one sun in the sky. A similar amount of broadsheets exists in German and Swiss archives, detailing strange phenomena in the sky, although Nuremberg seems to be the focus of a number of them. This is not surprising, considering Nuremberg was considered the up-and-coming city, the place to be if you had money and wanted to be noticed. Reading throughout the nobility of old Europe was much higher than those of the common field worker, but it certainly was improving, and gossip was fueled by the writing that appeared in the broadsheets. In Switzerland, we find another appearance of strange phenomena in 1566 over the town of Basel. The Basel broadsheet of 1566 describes unusual sunrises and sunsets. Skyward phenomena were said to have fought together in the form of numerous red and black balls in the sky before the rising sun. The author of the broadsheet and historian, Samuel Kokes, notes the phenomena as having religious connotations. Sadly, a melody of text that often discolours the actual events as authors attempt to fit them into their own religious paradigm. This time in history was exceptionally challenging for those living in them. A mini ice age brought food shortages, starvation, and famine. The impacts caused by the climate shift on life in Europe was also borne out with the increase of superstition, and in particular, people attempting to blame the failed crops on witches. Sadly and regrettably, thousands of women accused of witchcraft were burned. These heinous acts were carried out by frightened people trying to understand the reasons behind their children's starvation, fueled by religious dogma in the hope that their God would show them mercy. But mercy didn't come, and the onset of famine after famine from failed harvests and the impacts on human life were devastating. The glaciers in the Alps moved far beyond their normal patterns as the air was significantly cooler and summers became more wet. This period of cold began in around 1430 and lasted till around 1850. The 40 years spanning from 1560 were known as being consistently cooler and stormier, so much so that it was noted that storm activity increased by 85% in the second half of the 16th century. 32 weather diaries were written in astronomical calendars which existed from Central Europe during the late 15th and 16th centuries. These allow us to understand the nature of the weather and what effects it was having on the greater population of Europe at the time. Mechanical timepieces were a thing of the future in Europe during the 16th century. This was also before the idea of the international time zone. The time was either guessed for the general populace, or you simply read a sundial. A sundial is exceptionally reliable if it is set up properly, and can be accurate give or take a few minutes, but utterly useless in the dark or out of the sunlight. We were initially told the Nuremberg sightings appeared between 4 and 5 a.m. and in April, no less. Sunrise, however, in Nuremberg in any April is 6:25 a.m. So are we to assume that time in 1561 was guessed, and the phenomena would have to have been low in the sky, rising with the sun? I suspect the weather had a huge amount to play with these sightings, and rather than them being aliens or demons fighting each other over the dominance of our souls on the ground, what may have been happening may have been more down to earth. Frank Johnson proposed a theory about the Nuremberg phenomena. He speculated what people had witnessed was actually a parhelion. This phenomena are caused by ice crystals in the air and have often been called sundogs. Extremely cold air, the angle of the sun, and particular ice crystals involved can all produce this phenomena. These arcs can even be seen around a bright moon at night. There are too many questions around the author of the original broadsheet, Hans Glaser, back in 1561. We don't know if he actually witnessed the strange phenomena in the early hours, or whether his woodcut was based on eyewitness testimonies, which in themselves are plagued with inconsistencies, or whether, like the Basel phenomena of 1566, it was adapted by the religious rhetoric to gain ground on the opposition, claiming them to be signs of God's disdain. Rather, like Frank Johnson, looking at the facts, including the extreme weather conditions, the Nuremberg sky battle of 1561 was nothing more than a peaceful and gentle sundog, a possible reminder to live every day as they come, and take the time to appreciate the beauty in the world, even when we find ourselves in the worst of it. The last decade of the 16th century was certainly the coldest Europe had faced, and the great Spanish kingdom faced a huge defeat against England, not at the hands of its naval fleet, rather at the mercy of Mother Nature. As white settlers attempted to locate new lands and sources of food in the New World, they also had to deal with harsh tempests crossing the Atlantic and to a land ravished by drought. This drought situation had serious ramifications for the British colonists who were last seen on the 22nd of August 1587. They were left behind in an attempt to establish a settlement known as Roanoke.
Thank you, Barry, for allowing me to play that. And if you visit Barry Fitzgerald's YouTube site, you can see the visuals that go with that recording. But as you can tell by the way Barry tells the story, you don't really need the visuals because it's very descriptive anyway. Okay, right, let's get into the interview with Barry Fitzgerald. Hello, Barry, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Steve, for having me on.
Well, I'm actually very, very pleased to get you on, Barry. You're one of my heroes of the paranormal world, I must say, because you've been everywhere. You're a bit of an adventurer. I didn't really know what to call the show because you've been into every type of paranormal adventures that there are, you know. And I guess we ought to try and qualify that. You really kind of hit the scene with Ghost Hunters International, didn't you?
That's right. Yeah, that's I've been researching the field now, rolling on over 3 decades, and part of that, of course, was from around 2006, moving forward to 2011. I was working with the TV company from Los Angeles, and looking into all things paranormal on a global spectrum. But that path just did not end there. It brought me into many different areas where I continued to work and research and see this common thread that seemed to link a lot, in fact, all of the outer fringes, including ufology and cryptozoology and things like that, where it was joining it all together. And that work, of course, led me into my own mythology and folklore of Ireland, and to see that we were looking at the same things here, and then broadly looking at folklore mythology there in, say, New Zealand, South Africa, in the Americas, to see that they're experiencing the same thing. Only it was only under a different guise. The phenomena, and this is the key, the phenomena remained the same, but the mask changed. And what I realized very quickly is that we cannot trace the phenomena via the mask. It was impossible, because the mask kept changing, so you ended up in a dead end street. And but when we followed the phenomena of how they interact with us, that led us back, and led me back in particular, thousands of years. And that was an amazing discovery. And seeing how this process all unfolded and continues to unfold in front of us.
Yeah. I mean, I think the last time I saw you was a couple of years ago, before the world went mad. I think it was before it was at Cressing Barnes, I think, or was it Awakening? I can't remember. It was the last time. I know they were quite close together, weren't they?
They were, yeah. I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember which was the last one, but because of course then you had the other adventure that followed on from that was kind of I guess we ought to talk a little bit about the alien mummies.
Oh yes.
You know, I don't know how deep you want to go in.
Well, the mummies, of course, hit the scene via some videos that came out on the internet and across some magazines, and what they depicted were these human-sized figures that had long appendages, but only had 3 fingers on each hand, and 3 fingers on the 3 toes on each foot. Now, when we delved into it more, myself and Steve Mera, we discovered that there were also smaller figurines that were also uncovered from this Peruvian cave somewhere in the Andes. Now, the location of the cave remained a secret, but there were claims that there were tunnels that led off in various different directions underneath some of the sarcophagi where the bodies were discovered, and that some of these smaller creatures, which were around maybe 30, 35 inches, 40 inches high, they were still alive. And they scurried off into the darkness, into the cave system.
Really?
And that technology didn't work either within the cave systems. It malfunctioned. And there was also the alleged reported death of someone within the caves in connection with these particular mummies. Now, the mummies, they were covered in this white powder.
Yeah.
And no one seemed to know what it was, where they come from, but there was this allegation that was being made that they were alien. And that's what took Steve and myself out to Peru to document this and really find out what was going on. So when we finally made it out, it became clear that things were not as we were told. And the more we delved into it, the several trips occurred over this particular investigation. And I got to know Peru very, very well again.
Yeah, I'm very jealous.
Yeah. We discovered that we were waist deep in body trafficking and the black market and crime. And look, we need to call this for what it is, and utilizing exceptionally talented professionals from Russia, from France. The information was all there from England. We couldn't get a DNA result from the bodies themselves. It just wasn't making any sense. The dates were all over the place. We weren't getting any mitochondrial DNA, and it was just everywhere. So it was making no sense. But where we did get our breakthrough was in the X-rays, and that's revealed that the body parts were not matching up. And the more the investigation went on, and thanks to the Peruvian investigation team out there as well, we all discovered that these bodies were being dug up. There were bodies of infants, bodies of animals, and life-size remains that were being brought to a specialized warehouse, not far outside Peru, the capital, Lima. And where the bodies were being prepared in a specialized chemical solution, which allowed the skin to be stretched. Now it was the chemical solution that was affecting the mitochondrial DNA analysis. That's why we couldn't find what was going on. The white powder, which was made of diatomaceous earth, it was covering the handiwork that was being created. And
yeah, it's like a calcium deposit, wasn't it?
Yes, it was like a preservative that was being used. And the main body, she was being sold for, I believe she was in the market for $1 million. And the smaller ones, they wanted $100,000 each. And we blew the lid on it. And that was that. So it was a good piece of investigation.
Yeah. And
we left it at that. So I don't think I'll be back in Peru anytime soon. I don't think I'll be too well.
Yeah. Did you make some enemies out over there?
I definitely think we did. Yes. So it'll be interesting to see if there's any more coming out, because the warehouse had quite a few bodies in it. Right. That was they were getting ready for sale on the market.
Yeah, I do remember seeing an interview with somebody who was actually the person who was doing all the fakery, if you like. I don't know. I did know his name at the time. I can't remember what his name was now. Was he kind of an underworld figure?
There were quite a few names that were involved in this. And it all came down to money. Yeah. And I got to let the listeners know that I can understand where they're coming from, because poverty in Peru is like nothing we have ever seen here in the British Isles. Yeah. And to do what they did, I can understand
understand, but you can be sure that the majority of that money was not going to people on the ground. This was going to line the pockets of people who already had the money, which is usually always the case.
Yeah. Was Jaime Maussan was involved in that? Was he taken in as well, or was he one of the ones sort of involved in it?
Jaime, I believe, was taken in by it, yes, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. Because it wouldn't be the first time, would it? Or do you think he just sort of dives into something with both feet and sort of gets taken in himself? Because he then starts to get other people interested, doesn't he? Which I presume is what happened with you and Steve.
It's a very, very difficult field to investigate because a majority of the time all you have is eyewitness accounts.
Yeah.
And or maybe a shaky video or something like that. So when something like that is brought across your table, I can understand Jaime Maussan's enthusiasm.
Yeah.
To get there and see what's happening and everything else. And like many media reporting today, it's not so much checking facts; it's about speed of delivery. And I think that's a very, very big grave mistake where we find the media reporting today is that it's not necessarily about the facts; it's just the speed of delivering the information.
Yeah, sure, I understand that. But, okay, I guess we better leave the alien mummies. But do you think that anything else will materialise out of that in the future? Because I do understand that there are still people that believe that they are real. You know.
Well, you know, the proof is there, and it's certainly something that Steve and I don't dwell on anymore. We've done our part within the mummy genre, and we have left that behind and move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Well, you got a good trip out of it anyway.
Yeah. You know, we got our medal for it, and that was that.
Oh, right. Now, it might be a personal question. Did you actually finance that yourself? I mean, did you lose money by it? I mean, don't answer that if it's too personal, you know.
Any time that you set foot in a plane, you're always going to lose money.
Oh, right, okay.
Always.
Yeah. So you probably weren't very pleased about that either.
Well, you know, it never really interests me anyway, money, but for me it's about the story, it's about what it could lead to. I just wasn't expecting it to lead to that.
Sure. Yeah.
And it was unfortunate because a lot of the things that I'll investigate, there tends to be a lot more of the paranormal nature to it. This was very much linked to a very physical deception.
Sure.
On the human's part.
Yeah. I mean, all right, we'll leave that. I think leave that bit alone. I mean, I'd like to talk a bit about where you actually live in a beautiful part of Southern Ireland, as I understand it.
I do, yes.
And you apparently get a lot of UFO reports getting over there, so I've been tipped off.
There actually is a lot of UFO reports, especially since starting the on the lead up into 2019, moving forward to where we are today. There was a lot leading up to October 2019. Now I was out at Skinwalker in October 2019. I just got back days before the whole world fell apart, and when I was here, we were locked down. I was getting stories of people here on the west that were having encounters, some remarkable encounters, and some really, really good video footage of the phenomena itself. And like there was one story that I came across, and it was a young lad that was coming back from cutting some turf in the bog, and they had a brand new tractor. And this thing came over the top of the tractor, exceptionally bright light, and they ended up with missing time, and the clocks of the tractor, the gauges and everything else, they malfunctioned, some of them melted, and the tractor was ruined.
Wow.
That brand tractor never ever worked again, and even though it went back to the shop to get fixed. They couldn't fix it. He ended up getting a new tractor out of it.
Huh.
So the bizarre, the high strangeness of all this stuff certainly does not only happen in other parts of the world. It is definitely happening here as well, in this little island out in the Atlantic.
Yeah, I know you get quite a lot of interesting occurrences over there. Paranormal legends, I suppose, like the Banshee and things like that, which you've written about.
Yeah. The whole island, north and south, has a beautiful series of myths and legends, which many of them, I got to say, are still very much alive today. And people may find that hard to believe that we live in a society with the electric light and cars and cell phones and everything else, that this type of thing would still exist. But you see, the thing is, David, we're the ones that became detached from it. It wasn't that we became smarter. It wasn't the fact that these things just faded into the darkness. No, they're still very much. They still happen very much so on the fringes of our society. But we're the ones who detached from it. We very rarely walk anywhere anymore. We jump into a car, and for those that do walk, we stick earbuds into our ears, and off we march through the countryside, listening to whatever it is we're listening to, and we cut ourselves off from what is happening around us. And both Cormac and I, we wrote a series of books, Legend Seekers, Banshee, and Banshee was an examination of the portent of death, and she would appear just before the death of someone in the family or friendship circle, whatever the case may be, and she would deliver this God Almighty scream that it really engages your fight or flight response. And this is a very interesting point to make, David, because a lot of people would say, oh, all you're hearing is a fox. All you're hearing is someone on the street, some lady in the street, screaming for whatever reason. But I can assure you, I haven't heard it 3 times now. That is not anything of this world. That I've been in the countryside, I've heard foxes, I've heard hares being caught in a trap, and all of this does not fit into the likes of the Banshee scream. And I can also tell you this, and this is something that I also discovered when we interviewed people who were hearing it all around the island, that even though you hear it, and you maybe hear it multiple times, you recognize it immediately once you hear it, but you can't describe it. After all this time, I haven't got the vocabulary to describe what it actually is that I'm hearing. But I can tell you this, it engages your fight or flight. And this is the interesting point to make between the fox and the Banshee. She engages your fight or flight. She is letting you know there's an importance with the message, and your body is reacting to that. And so that's the difference between hearing the fox or hearing a Banshee, is that your body reacts to it. And by Jesus, it frightens the life clean out of you.
Wow.
That is something that is, I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but it is something that I've heard now 3 times. And it's something that you never ever forget. And it was interesting that from Cormac and I's perspective about the Banshee, that even foreigners who were coming to the island, some on vacation, some to settle here, they even had encounters. And returning to their land of origin, if they're just vacationing here, they discovered that the death has happened to one of their friends in their tight circle, or whatever the case may be. So it was interesting to even have their accounts on paper. That this particular aspect of our myth is still very much there and very much affecting the landscape. And I think from our perspective, there are clues to be had from her name itself. The the banshee. She in itself is more. It's an old term, but not as old as the others. It refers to the people of the mound, the banshee, the fairy woman. But she in itself is not indicative of the fairy per se. It's actually indicative of the Neolithic mounds that dot our landscape. These huge passage chambers in some parts that are orientated to specific times of the year, to either allow the full moon to enter its chambers or the sunlight to enter its chambers. And she is the mounds. So when we say the banshee, it's woman of the mound. It's about where they're coming from and what our ancestors were actually communicating with and where.
Have any been known to have been seen, or is it just a sound that is heard?
Oh, they have been seen, yes. And some people have seen them from the perspective of straight on, and some people just in passing. A lot of them tend to be of somewhat of a smaller stature, almost childlike, and usually the face is covered, and some people would say it looked like an infant standing in the field, and they would have this white aura or white veil or mist surrounding them, and it's almost ethereal. And but no sooner do you see them, to the screen is delivered, and that's it. Most people's legs are in action before their minds are wondering what the hell's happened, and they're halfway down the road.
Yeah.
It is interesting. And there was one guy that we interviewed from Dublin. Now Dublin's a big metropolitan city, of course, and he was hanging out his washing on the line in the back garden, and it was at night, and all he had was this little yard light that lit into the darkness. And as he was hanging the clothes out in the back of the garden, he could have swore he'd seen something, and he stopped hanging the clothes and just parted them and looked into the garden, and that's when he saw her. And she moved across the garden, and suddenly she stopped because she realized she was being watched. And she then immediately assaulted him. She came straight at him.
Oh.
That guy is still going through therapy.
Wow.
And, it was that horrific for him. And this is an interesting point, because when we go back and we start looking at legends of the she or the fairy, as they're known in the modern age, we find that when people spy on them, that they seem to know that they're being watched, and they take great vengeance on those that are spying. And this is also a common feature that we tend to find in the ufology field. When the things are on the ground and the people are keeping an eye on them, and if they know that they're being watched, well, then all hell can break loose. And no more so than some. There was one of the remote viewers there from Hawaii was brought down to a place in South America where they observed this craft land into a body of water. But before they did that, it suddenly released this lightning show into the air, and they became aware that whoever was inside the ship knew that they were being spied on, and they had to flee. They had to leave the area fast.
Do you feel the banshee? Do you feel that they could be an interdimensional creature? If you say they turn up when times of death, is it something like connected to the spiritual world? And why would it be different?
It depends. You see, it really depends on what we call spiritual. You see, this is something that both Brian Allen and myself, we're releasing a book, The Deceptions of Gods and Men, next March. And we go into this because within the modern age, we have this idea that the soul and spirit is an interchangeable terminology. It's not. The soul and the spirit are two separate aspects of something that enjoys inhabitants within this bag of flesh. So when we look at this, we have to understand that there is an aspect of something coming beyond the veil from a place of nothing. And I think this is where we tend to see a lot of this stuff coming from. And this is why we tend to find a lot of the deceit that comes with it. Deceit and deception are key factors within a majority of the things that are coming through the veil. And, you know, we tend to see this even in the seance rooms of old, where after a while, Great Aunt Betty, turns out it isn't Great Aunt Betty, and the deception is unfolded. And when the deception unfolds, of course, they back off from where they come from. The sad aspect to this is that not many today are aware of the deception, and that can lead to serious implications when dealing with things from this other place. And yes, I do believe it is like a dimensional doorway that is being utilized, coming back and forth. Steve happened to say that Steve Mira happened to say that space is unusually quiet, and we don't tend to see these ships coming across the Gulf of space. Instead, they're appearing down here. They're coming from the water. They're coming from rocks, from a rock face, and things like that. And again, you know, when we look at this connection to the rocks, we also tend to find this thread that weaves through many of the areas. David Pauldys from the US, former police officer who is a wonderful author on the Missing 411 series.
Yeah.
David happened to mention that the majority of the people who go missing in boulder fields. Now, why is that?
Yeah, why is that?
Now, when we look at a lot of the UFO things, we tend to find also these things disappear into rock faces, from Wales to Jamaica, and all these things tend to happen. And when we go back into mythology and folklore, even within the British Isles there, you know, you've got that terminology of a goblin, which, you know, we all joke about now, but again, a goblin was a mask, and goblins derived from the old French, which is gobelin, which is derived from the old German Kub, which refers to a hole in the rock. So again, we're coming back to the rocks. What is it about this planet that these things need to come through and deliver whatever it is they're delivering, whatever message it is that they're delivering, and lead us down sometimes a very precarious path.
Well, you mentioned about holding a rock. Was it you that time that there was a hole in a cave or something, and you went back to find it and you couldn't find it again? Or was that Paul Bradford?
Yes.
That was you, wasn't it?
It was over here it was here in the west of Ireland, and I tend to do a lot of the work, the exploring of the landscape and stuff, and seeing what's there. I tend to do a lot of it with my four-legged companion, Max. He's a huge animal, and he's a cross between a Dutch Shepherd and a Japanese Akita.
Oh, right. It's not a horse. I thought you were talking about a horse. Right.
He is exceptional.
It's big enough for a horse, yeah.
And in fact, he would find a lot of the caves that I would simply walk past, because there seems to be a certain smell that comes out of the cave that he picks up on, and he'll indicate to me where the cave is. And handy whenever you're looking for something which has been written about 600 or 700 years ago and is now covered over. But we ended up in a cave system, and the strange thing is, David, that when we ended up in this cave system, there were rectangular holes that were dug straight down. Now, I was away into this cave system. The ceiling height was around 5 feet. These rectangular holes went down 7 feet. So there's no way you could have got a digger in there to dig that out so smoothly. The sides were smooth, but they were also straight. The corners were perfect. But there was nothing lying around. There was no, it was as if the dirt had went downward instead of upward, like someone was digging it out. And when I
it just doesn't make sense, does it? No.
It doesn't. And when I looked into this shaft that went down 7 feet, there was another shaft underneath it. And I thought to myself at the time, now, what's down here? This was not mentioned in the mythology and folklore. So what is down here? And every time I went to go near it, Max started crying and whimpering. And he's never, ever done that to date. So I said, okay, maybe he's picking up on something that I'm not, because my enthusiasm and my excitement has got me, I'm not listening to my own instinct. And I stepped back, and he settled down, and I went to go forward again, and again he started this whimpering. So I said, okay, I'm going to respect his input, and we walked away. But before I walked away, I took a photograph. Now, I've been back in those caves many times, Dave, and I can tell you this, I have not only can I not find the shaft that went down, the actual chamber that the shaft was in, I cannot find.
Wow.
It's as if there was just a wall just appeared over it. And I was back in those particular cave systems with a friend of mine, maybe 3.5 years ago, and he was there with his son, and I believe he was 9 at the time, and we ended up in a slightly different cave system, but it was there were 2 ways into it, which were about maybe a 10-foot shaft, maybe about 3 foot high, and the width of an adult, and it went into a straight shaft, so that both shafts were connected with a 30-foot shaft in the hill. Now, we agreed that I was going to try the first shaft first, going in to see if I could get access into that one. I couldn't. So I told them to wait at the second shaft, and we'll all go in together. So when I got back, I walked around and they were gone. And I thought to myself, what on earth? And I went up onto the top of the hill looking for them, and they weren't there. I tried his phone, it wouldn't connect. And I thought, what on earth is going on here? And I went back down and I was shouting for them, and I was trying to call them on the cell phone, nothing. Then finally I went into the cave, and I said, okay, the ground's mucky, I'll see his footprints. He obviously went in not listening to what I was talking about, the warnings I'd given, and he had gone into the cave. So I followed inside, and on the mucky ground on the way in, there were no footprints. So I came back out again. Again, I went to the top of the hill. Nothing. And I thought to myself, have I gone through some type of shift? But there were joiners working on a roof of a house down in the valley, and I could see that there was no change. So I knew I was fine. And I went back into the cave system, and I was shouting and yelling for these two, and there was nothing. So I came back out, and I was about to make that call, because his wife was sitting with my wife back in the house, and I was going to have to tell her I've lost them both. A horrible call to make, but my head was going through all the things that the warnings within the mythology and the folklore, and as I turned the corner, there the boy was sitting playing a little game station. And I said, where the hell were you? And he says, what do you mean, where were we? Where were you? For 45 minutes, we could not see each other or hear each other in 30 feet of a cave. Neither inside or outside for 45 minutes. I still can't explain that to this day.
That sounds very strange. Do you think it could be some sort of a portal or dimensional gate or something you may have gone through?
Oh, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. The things I have seen here, David, would really shock you. And I was at a location here in Sligo, and I had reporters and everything with me. We were spending the weekend at this location, and it was known for the she activity. And we went up onto the hill, and we had our encounters with them. And they all got to experience this phenomenon in all its splendor. But at the same time, when you've got this idea of a portal opening in front of you, this amber ball of light that should make its way over, and this open, and you're looking at a different landscape on the other side, that's exceptional. That's rare, but it's exceptional. And we have had our encounters. But I have to say that since writing The Deception of Gods and Men, I call into question now the authenticity of what is actually communicating with us. And since then, they've backed away. They have stepped away because and this is something that I've seen time and time again. When they know that you're suspicious, the activity slows down or rather stops. And even with the ufology, I've seen that as well, because I became suspicious of it, and everything just stopped. And I thought, there we go again, the same phenomena, different mask.
What do you mean by that? Do you mean that they say that you're getting too close to an answer or something, or?
Yes. You're becoming suspicious of them, of their deception. And the moment that they suspect that you're getting too close, or you're about to realize that the game's up, they'll hightail it out of there.
Don't know where to go from there. It's kind of a funny aspect I've not thought of before. Again, it's
yeah. Well, when you've got again, this phenomena of ufology, which also crosses over neatly into the seance rooms of all.
Oh yeah, definitely. So
yeah. You've got the likes of the scroll experiment, for instance, that was happening over in England between 93 to 98, and some fantastic experiments that were being done down there, and very, very documented. And the details of the documentation are splendid, but you're also able to see there that these things that were coming through, that took on forms of aliens, what we would know today as aliens, and even present themselves as small little craft that appear within the seance room, and these videos and photographs that were being taken and captured within the seance room, and we think, oh wow, this is fantastic, this is great, but the guys in the seance room, of course, were told, no, this has to happen in complete darkness, or at least a small bit of light. But for the most part, it has to happen in complete darkness. You can't see what's going on. And yet, in the 1970s, in the Liverpool laboratories in the United States, these things were appearing in broad daylight. They choose the rules. And because we don't communicate with each other, we think it's new. And then whenever we step back into the 1930s, we also find within seance rooms that the same phenomenon was happening. But we think it's new. It's just the same thing. It's the same phenomenon, different mask.
Do you think they're actually drawn to you in any way? Or do you feel that this happens to sort of a lot of people, or is it something about you that this happens to? I'm not trying. It's not a trick question. I'm just wondering if.
No, not at all. I do think that there are a series of people who do have this lineage of phenomena that follows them, and this is not their fault. This is something that that they've inherited from one or both of their parents, who have inherited it from one or two of their parents. And this lineage continues back in time, into the eons of the past. Now, for the reasons as to why they chose them, who knows? Who knows? But what we tend to find is that more times than not, that when you tend to have strange activity that circumvents around someone's person or someone's home, there is a heritage or a lineage of heritage that goes along with this.
Yeah, I have heard that before. That's why I kind of asked you that question, because it does seem to me that you've got some sort of a thing that draws them, you know. I've heard, as I say, I've heard it from several people.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe a curiosity, but they certainly don't like that curiosity when you start asking questions.
No, I understand that. That story that you were telling about about the cave when you couldn't find it again, is that in the book The Mist of the Gods? In the Mist of Gods, I should say.
It could well be. Yeah, I can't.
Yeah, I remember reading about it.
That one was written a long time ago.
Yeah, I know it's a few years ago, but no, because it was a fascinating story. That, and I remember you telling it. The reason I got mixed up with you and Paul, because you were both at the same event, and he was telling stories, you were telling stories, and off the top of my head I thought, oh, what was it you that told it? And I was pretty sure it was you. But it's pretty fascinating.
It's something else. It's something else that we tend to find as well within the phenomena, and the likes of night attacks is another thing that tends to follow the family line. And when we're talking about night attacks, I'm not talking about the hallucinations caused by dream state and things like that. No, I'm talking about something completely different. And it's also interesting to note that 9 times out of 10, it's women who are attacked more so than men during a nighttime assault. And these things always seem to attack when the women enter their monthly cycle.
Right.
It seems that when the iron count is low, that's when the door opens for the attack to happen. And isn't it interesting that when we go back and we look at the information that our ancestors left behind, they always said to ward off the evil eye, you used iron. To stop the fairies from stealing your children, you put iron pokers over the crib. There was always this connection with iron, and yet within the today, we see that when these things attack is when the iron is low. And it's interesting as well. I noted that when we look at hemochromatosis, that is a medical condition in which the body produces too much iron, and that in effect protects us from them. Ultimately, it leads to our demise. But considering that our ancients within the British Isles were possibly, and the evidence is certainly suggesting this, that they were communicating with something beyond the veil, that suffering from hemochromatosis would have been very beneficial to you, because you're able to keep one foot on this side and one foot on the other side, and they can't close the door. And it was something that, above all other races around the world, the Celts suffered from it the most.
Oh, why was that, I wonder?
I don't know. I wonder, was there something connected with that aspect of the heritage, what they were dealing with? Who knows?
You've written several other books, The Influence, etc.
Yeah.
I know you've got your new book coming out. Now, you did cover a little bit about it just now. Now, it's called The Deception of Gods and Men, and you've written it with Brian Allen, and it's going to be on the Flying Disc Press, which is Philip Mantle's publishers. He's doing quite well, actually. Philip Mantle's been quite a few books coming out.
He has indeed, yeah.
So what made you actually decide to write that with Brian?
I think it was about, considering the world that we're in at the moment, it was the look at this polarization, this aspect of story and myth that suggests that beyond the veil there was this polarization between, I suppose, good and evil and things like that. But I strip away that, and I look, and looking at the information at hand, it suggests that what we're actually dealing with is of the same coin. Even though we've got two different sides, we're looking at the same coin. In other words, they're all the same thing. And it's about where we can contact them, what influence they've possessed over us over the millennia that they have been here, and how they continue to interfere, and who they interfere with. And when we go back and looking at the release of the book, we tend to find that there's also this significant connection to magnetic anomalies, geomagnetic anomalies around the world. And we've got technology now at hand, free technology, on which we can see these hotspot areas. And when we go back and we look at these hotspot areas, we tend to find that these places were also key places for worship, for blood worship, and from our ancestors' perspective. And then we also cross-reference that, and we also discovered that 70% of the world's top suicide locations also appear in these locations. And I thought, wait a minute, this is weird. Now, when we consider this aspect of blood worship and everything else, we also find that 75% of the world's ammunition development, storage, is also utilized in these areas. So it really does make you wonder what on earth is going on, and has blood worship ceased? Did that end when we found the electric light, or has it got worse? Because the very weapons that are being designed and manipulated and utilized are being designed in these places where the people went to commune with these things on the other side.
I think that the question I kind of was, how did you come to write it with Brian Allen? Did you choose him especially, or was you brought together for some reason?
No, Brian and I were very, very similar on our perspectives, and we just said, let's do it. And I was already half of the way through the book, and I said, yeah, let's do it. And off we went, and we completed it. And I'm actually working on another one at the moment, and it's called the Fruit of the Gods, and that tracks a particular tree, a species of tree that was utilized at the solstice to allow communication with these things beyond the veil, within the passage chambers, within these Neolithic stone structures, and how this technology and how this species of tree came from the east with the builders of the chambers, and what it does, and its history right up till today. It's been all forgotten for the most part, and it was an experience that I had, which I'll not go into now, but it was a weird experience that led me to the fruit being produced from these trees that were connected to the gods of Babylon and the Fertile Crescent. Yeah,
I'd like to get Brian on the show at some point. He's been on my list, but I think he's another person that's always quite busy. But he's been on my list. I will contact him and get him on the show as well. Hopefully he'll come on. But
no problem. I will definitely let him know that you're trying to get in contact.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I've got a list. He's been on there for some time. Now, you've got a website called Charm Stealer, where all your books are available from. Is that right,
That's
Barry?
Yeah.
Can you get? I suppose you can get them on Amazon or the usual outlets as well. Can you?
Yes, you can. You can indeed. Yeah. But if people want to see the videos or any of the documentaries that were done, they can pop over to Charm Stealer and charmstealer.com, and they can follow on from there.
Yeah, I know. He's got quite a lot of interesting stuff on there, so I would recommend it. And I will actually put a link on the Paranormal Dimensions page as well. And
Thank you.
so everyone needs to look out for your new book. It's called Deceptions of Gods and Men with Brian Allen, and it's on Flying Disc Press, which is Philip Mantle's publications, and that's coming in March 2022. Hopefully.
That's it.
Or is that a floating date? Is that a definite date?
No, that's it. That's it. Set in stone.
Excellent. Okay, Barry. Well, it's been fantastic having you on the show. I hope to get to see you again. Hopefully the world's going to settle down again, or do you not think so?
Well, I think we have a long way to go yet, David.
Do you?
And I really do hope that we do get to meet each other again.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, if ever I get over to Southern Ireland, I'd hope to pop in to see you. Because I'd love to come over to Southern Ireland. I've never been there.
You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome.
Thank you.
Calling it.
I've been over to Northern Ireland, for a day trip once when I was working. I was sent over there for the day to sort a job out, and I had to fly back the same day. They could have at least let me stay there. But, that wasn't quite as pretty as Southern Ireland, I don't think.
Oh, the north has its beauty as well. The north coast there is
but I wasn't in the, where did I fly into? It was,
Belfast.
Belfast, that's right. Yeah, I couldn't think of the name of it. Belfast is where I flew in for the day.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, the countryside around it reminded me very much of Yorkshire, actually.
Yes.
It's all very similar.
There are, having travelled a lot, there are parts of the landscape around Ireland that match various different countries. So, I'm contented if I don't travel again. I've still got it all here.
Yeah, I know it's beautiful where you are, but I'll hold you to that. If ever I go over to Southern Ireland, I'll give you a shout. I'd love to come over there.
There you go.
But we can go see if we can find that cave. Anyway, Barry, it's been fantastic having you on the show. Thank you so much for finding the time. It's been a great pleasure having you on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for some amazing stories, and I shall be looking out for that book myself, and good luck with it. And I do hope to see you again, hopefully in 2022. Let's all keep our fingers crossed.
There you go.
But,
that's all we can do.
Yeah. But until then, Barry, take care of yourself, and hope to speak to you again soon.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Love to your wife. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
There we are. That's Barry Fitzgerald, and you've been listening to Paranormal. Oh, sorry, he's still there. You've been listening to Paranormal Dimensions on the UK Radio Network. I'm David Young. Thanks for listening, and I'll speak to you again next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Paranormal Dimensions is as bright and powerful as our celestial star, the sun. And although it's expending thousands of pounds of energy every minute of the day, have no fear. There's plenty left.
Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK Radio Network.
say this.
They're laughing at you. They're not laughing with you.
Fine. I remember my daughter Kerry saying to me, you know, Dad, one day I'm going to be able to walk down Union Street and I'm going to be able to say, my dad's not mad. Look at what he said. Look at what is happening. He was right.
After 30 years, thank God! Thank God I've never seen you on road when I was like a teenager, and I thought, oh my God, I said that man, even then.
Oh, thank you.
So, and now, thank God. Thank God.
You've been so kind to everyone.
No
so
problem.
Patient.
No.
Thank you very much.
Have a picture with
Of course, yeah. Which one? That one?
Yeah.
Who's it for?
Yeah, that's
Joe. Hey!
You're my hero.
Oh, you're mine. Hey!
Brilliant work you're doing.
Thank you.
David,
Oh, it's all yours.
David, we love you. Can we get a selfie?
Go on,
You're
then.
so amazing.
Go on then.
Oh, well
Thank
done.
you.
We love you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey!
Cheers, mate. I've been following you for years. Keep up
Cheers,
the good work.
mate. Cheers. Thank you. Thank you, mate.
But how good does that feel to say that they're not laughing at you now?
No, they're not laughing at me now.
No, they're not.
They're trying to ignore me. The sight of these people in these vast numbers walking through the London streets saying we're not having it anymore is it's so freaking emotional, you know. You know, I've done some things in my life, but you know, this is an incredible day for me to have seen all those years ago, those decades ago, where no one wanted to know and everything you said was crazy, and now you see the world waking up on this scale. So you know, the whole COVID era has been a fascistic nightmare, but it has woken people up to the fact that there are forces running human society that are not the people they see, and we have an opportunity now to turn that, seeing that, into ceasing to cooperate with it. And if the kind of numbers we're starting to see cease to cooperate with the diktats of authority and fascism, then the numbers alone mean it cannot prevail. So this is a fantastic, pivotal day. And a day that gives you enormous encouragement for where we go from here. Hey! Hey! How are you, man? Hi! Can I get a picture of you? Yeah, of course. I love this. Thank you. How the police should be. I'm afraid. Thank you, mate.
I say wait and see.
The coronavirus pandemic started in China. Oxygen, medical supplies and hospital staff have
One of the 5 vaccines and research.
Stage 1, you create a problem. It could be a manufactured virus. You want a reaction, and you want them to either say, do something, or you want them to accept what the authorities suggest must be done. So one of the agendas is to massively cull the population. They want to reduce the numbers.